Hi, everyone. I'm Steven Sigman,
And I'm Mike Messinio.
and this is the weekly movie Throwdown, where each week we take two films that have something in common and we talk through which one is better. This week, it's a throwdown between two stories about toxic achievement, I guess. Two films where people do their best to achieve perfection at a cost. So we're going to talk about 2010's Black Swan, directed by Darren Aronofsky, and it's going to go up against Damien Chazelle's Whiplash from 2014. Before we get into that conversation, let's talk about our wins of the week. Mike, do you have anything to shout out this week?
Yeah. I watched Apex on Netflix, which I would not say is my win of the week, but it was okay.
No.
It was fine. But I saw Dust Bunny as well, which just kind of randomly dropped on HBO Max. I wasn't even aware it was in the theater. I don't even know where it came from. But it was written and directed by Brian Fuller. Interesting idea about like a girl that hires an assassin to kill the monster under her bed. But it ends up being a lot more than that. Sigourney Weaver's in it. She's good. I just have to say, like, I don't know how much I love the storyline, but Brian Fuller makes some of the most beautiful things to look at. It was the same thing with Hannibal, and I don't really like serial killer stuff, but I just found Hannibal to be mesmerizing to watch. The same thing with Dust Bunny. He's just so visually inventive and makes things so enjoyable just to look at that I don't even know how great the story was, but I really liked watching it.
Yeah, that's Mads Mikkelsen, right? I keep seeing, I've heard about it for a while, but I haven't seen it. I should go back and watch it. I watched Apex 2, and I have to say, I think that's the most predictable film I've ever seen. I was thinking that right from the beginning. Like, I know exactly what's going to happen here.
I agree with you. That was part of my problem with it. I found it to be just it was just a mix of, the River Wild and The Most Dangerous Game, of course, and just a bunch of things that I've already seen. It didn't do anything for me. It was fun to see Taron Egerton play like a straight up crazy person, which was kind of fun. Yeah, it was just too, it feels, I don't to brag on Netflix all the time, but yeah, it just felt like a typical Netflix kind of thing where you just rehash something that has already been done and just try to repackage it and put it out. I don't know.
Yeah, I sat through it because I love Charlize, and we're going to talk about her next week. But I think, and I know actually we'll talk about Netflix next week, and I think the other film that we're going to talk about is probably falls into the same category, but we'll see. My win of the week could probably fall under the category we're discussing today of toxic overachievement. I revisited The Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino, which I hadn't seen. If I've seen it at all, it's been forever. There was, in April, the Criterion Channel had a collection of corporate thrillers, and this was in it, along with like Wall Street and The Firm, a lot of really good films in it. But I hadn't seen this in a long time, and I had actually just watched Apex, and I thought, let's go back and see earlier Charlize. It's a fun ride. Oh my God. Directed by Taylor Hackford. Amazing.
Yeah. I have a lot of love for The Devil's Advocate. It is just completely nuts. It is really, to me, I know when people think of like Al Pacino, in old stage Al Pacino, they think of Son of a Woman. I don't. I think A Devil's Advocate, it is like the perfect Al Pacino, like late stage Al Pacino performance. I love everything about it.
Yeah, he's like note perfect in it, and like an unusually expressive performance from Keanu. He's actually really good in it too. The Southern accent kind of comes and goes, but he's great in it. And
yeah, I think when Pacino's bringing it 100, Keanu can't bring 20. You got to at least go up to 50 just to maintain. So it ends up bringing out more of Keanu because he has no choice, or else Al Pacino's going to eat every piece of scenery in sight. So you really got to get after it.
Yeah. Charlize is really going for it too. I mean, coming off of watching Apex that's like a total 180 in energy. So it was interesting, but I I never really picked up before on the, like, Rosemary's Baby aspects of it, which I really enjoyed, 'cause I have that film on the brain lately, so it was cool to go back and watch it, and I think this collection's still on the Criterion Channel, so I'm gonna go back and watch Wall Street, which is another one that I haven't seen in forever, and I vaguely recall being just as insane as The Devil's Advocate, so I'm gonna have a lot of fun with that. Did you have any other wins of the week that you wanted to mention?
No, that was it.
All right, well, then let's get into our conversation about, Black Swan and Whiplash. So, just a little bit about why we're pairing these, and I mean, I think they're relatively the same story at their core in a lot of ways. I mean, it's this, like, really driven central character with a toxic mentor. One feels more external and the other internal, but I think they really just kind of work well together. And it's the same story told in 2 very different ways from 2 very different filmmakers. So I think, it's gonna be fun to kinda break them down. Both films won Oscars as well,
Yeah.
so that's another aspect of it
Yeah, I think it's a
of
great pairing. There's lots of similarities between them that I hadn't even thought about until rewatching them both. So yeah.
yeah, one thing I thought about a lot is that I mean, this is, like, totally nerdy and doesn't really matter as far as the films go, but right in the middle of these 2 films is kind of when the full shift to digital filmmaking happened. So in 2010, there's still a lot of stuff being shot on film. In 2013 is when, like, the top 100 grossing films of the year were predominantly digital. So and they have very different looks because of that. Some of Black Swan was shot digitally with a digital SLR camera, but for the most part, it's 16 millimeter film, whereas Whiplash is incredibly digital. You can see it in it. So I think that, the visuals around them tell a lot of the story too and the way they look.
Yeah, I agree. And I think and it's important you mention that because when you get deeper into the weeds of the actual filmmaking, both directors have specific feelings about film and digital. And Damien Chazelle kind of said this was because of the budget. I mean, there's really no choice but to shoot digitally. But his plan was just to shoot film going forward, and he has. Like, he's tried very hard not to shoot digitally if he can. Whereas Aronofsky is definitely more of a, using whatever he has to use to get his film made. The 16 millimeter allowed him to shoot handheld and kind of move around more. But what I didn't realize with Black Swan was how much digital effects there were. I mean, it was pretty early. I mean, 2010 is fairly early in the digital effects realm.
Yeah.
And I don't think I quite realized how many effects were used. And it's a lot of subtle and obvious ways, but he's very good at using them for maximum effect.
Yeah. Yeah, some of them are a little more seamless than others, and and some of them look like that crowd in that thing you do in that one CGI shot.
Yeah, that is
But
fair.
by and large, yeah, they're used to great effect. Coincidentally, or maybe unfortunately, Aronofsky's new film is 100% AI. So it's like he's really going in the other direction from film now, which is kinda sad. Let's focus on Black Swan. It is directed by Darren Aronofsky, written by Mark Heyman and, John J. McLaughlin with a story by credit to Andres Hines. And, this had 5 Oscar nominations. They both did, actually. Natalie Portman won for Best Actress. Here's a quick overview of it. Nina is a ballerina whose passion for the dance rules every facet of her life. When the company's artistic director decides to replace his prima ballerina for the opening production of Swan Lake, Nina is his first choice. She has competition in newcomer Lily, however. While Nina is perfect for the role of White Swan, Lily personifies the Black Swan. As rivalry between the two dancers transforms into a twisted friendship, Nina's dark side begins to emerge. Ooh, it's spooky. I mean, this is like a spooky version of Whiplash in a way. I mean,
Or
it's
it's or
kind of a
yeah, it's definitely got some All About Eve in it, and lots of movies pitting two women against each other in a way. But that's the thing about the movie that makes it interesting to me. is that you could say it's something like that, but because things start to get murky midway through, and then you start not even be able to understand what is real and what's not. It really puts a different twist on the idea of a female rival, because you start to wonder, is all of this just being invented, or is it real? And even you're not sure, and she's definitely not sure. But even we start to question it as we go through.
Yeah, Lily is a real person, but, like, Nina's interactions with her, we don't know. I mean, it it's basically Fight Club. I mean, it's like Tyler Durden is, what Jack can't be, and Nina is kind of what or, Lily is kind of what Nina can't be here, so, yeah, it's very interesting, and I love the psychology of it, and you like, the filmmaking actually goes into Nina's point of view with the kind of madness, and like you say, we don't know what's real and what isn't, and I love seeing everything through her eyes at first, because that really is immersive, and, it's very Aronofsky, this film. I mean, there's so much about it that is sort of his hallmark around this time. His first 4 films, if you look at them, you have Pi, Requiem for a Dream, this, and The Wrestler. And they're all very similar stories about people who sort of descend into madness and are sort of like self-destructive in a way to achieve something, and they really define themselves by what they are. And Aronofsky is so good at that, at just creating like claustrophobic situations and putting you into the mindset of these people. And this is a perfect example of that.
You are absolutely right about that. But I would say, of course, I mean, I don't even know how to put this, but yeah, it's what makes his movies incredibly polarizing. We'll put it that way.
Right.
I think you either
Absolutely.
really like Aronofsky or you don't. And I will just say that I appreciate his movies very much. I find it very hard to watch them more than once. Because yeah, he just goes to some really uncomfortable places, and that's something that he's really willing to dive into the middle of, and walk you through the point of view of a protagonist who's either losing their mind or is not trustworthy. But uh, I told this story before to friends, but I remember years ago that a a girl that I was dating at the time bought me a DVD of Requiem for a Dream for my birthday. And I realized in that moment that there was no way we would stay together, because I never wanted to see that movie ever again. I found it to be one of the most, you know, one of the hardest things I've ever had to watch. It was just punishing. And I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. Uh, but yeah,
When you broke up, did she take the DVD or did you keep it?
pretty sure I sold it pretty early on. I was just like, I don't want this thing in my house. It's a very hard movie, especially because as when I was younger, I had a crush on Jennifer Connelly. So you can imagine how I felt watching the end of that movie. It was the whole thing just kind of like broke me down. It was a lot. Yes.
I think Aronofsky's so good at that. And after this, he kind of goes in a different direction. But in the lead up to Black Swan, telling these stories that really feel like his wheelhouse, that are uncomfortable, but they're so good. And if you look at his track record with this, I'm just fascinated by this because I was researching it yesterday. And, he makes Pi, which is incredibly critically acclaimed. It's a very difficult film to watch. Then he makes Requiem for a Dream, which I'll never forget people walking out on the first time I went to see it, like a lot of people. And that tells you that I saw it more than once because I went to the theater to see it and then I rented it. But uh, Ellen Burstyn gets a Best Actress nomination at the Oscars for that film. Then you have The Wrestler. Mickey Rourke gets a Best Actor nomination. Then you have this, Natalie Portman wins Best Actress. And then he kind of goes in different directions. He does the Noah film and he does a bunch of other things, Mother. And then he comes back to this same kind of story in The Whale, and Brendan Fraser wins an Oscar. So it's like he really has this thing that he's so good at. And he's so good at bringing people along for the ride for, which is very evident in this film. But then there's some kind of stuff in the middle where he veers out a little bit that might not work as well. But this is like peak Darren Aronofsky in Black Swan, and it really
Yeah, that's an
shows.
excellent point. And clearly he creates an environment that helps actors bring out something. I read an interview where he talked about that he really only likes working with actors who are kind of willing to push themselves, and that's the environment he tries to create to get those performances. So yeah, you're right.
I was thinking about that. I wonder if he's a director the way the Leroy character is like a theater director, like pushes the actors the way, Vincent Cassell does. But yeah, speaking of commitment to the film, I mean, when you talk about Natalie Portman, not only did she physically, change herself by losing 20 pounds for this, and she went on to study ballet even before the film was financed on her own dime for like a year in advance. And then because it was such a shoestring budget, when she got hurt, they couldn't afford a medic. I mean, that's crazy to me that a set wouldn't have a medic, but they couldn't afford one. So she said, "Get rid of my trailer and hire a medic." So the next day, her trailer was gone and they had a medic on set. So she's really just like all in on this. And I even read that she did that movie, Your Highness, just to kind of help fund this because they couldn't get the funding for it.
I'm so
So
glad you said
that's a
that. I
commitment.
have been trying to figure out what the hell she was doing in that movie for so long.
That's a weird one, man. That was in that time when like Franco and Rogan were, making whatever they wanted, and it was so bizarre. And yeah, she very much stood out in
Mystery
that.
solved.
Yeah, there you go. Do it for a paycheck. Uh, you know, there's such an unraveling in this film, and you see a little bit of that in Whiplash, but it's so psychological here. And I do think that Aronofsky does a great job of just showing that over time. And that's where the CGI and the effects come in, I think, is that there are little things here and there right from the beginning when she sees Lily on the subway and it's her, and it's just such a good use of those things to kind of unravel the story a little more and unravel her brain a little more as it goes on, and they build and build, and I just think it's such a beautifully paced thing in its inconsistent pacing, because that's kind of like by design that she is falling apart, and what a great story of pressure too. I mean, and that's the whole point of this week is like people handling this pressure or not handling it, and she is really, I mean, there's so much on her, and all of these confined spaces and living with her mom. The mom, Barbara Hershey, I mean, we have to talk about her. Oh my God. Could you imagine? Could you imagine living in that house?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's the thing to discuss about both movies and this one as well, where you have these outside forces kind of working on these people. And the question is, do they create what we see, or is it already there? And these people just kind of exacerbate it, or and that's what's good about both movies is that you're not 100% sure, and especially in Black Swan, because you're right. I mean, I've watched it more than once, and at first you kind of feel like, is this a situation that the mother has created? But then in other ways, because you start to understand that clearly she has mental health issues and she's dealing with something, and you're like, well, is her mother that way because she knows her daughter is two steps from a breakdown at any point? Or did she create that in the first place because of her own career that didn't take off? So it's like they hint at these things, but it's really hard to know. And that's another thing that I think Aronofsky does well. He doesn't necessarily tell you exactly how you're supposed to feel about these things. Uh, he just kind of lays it out and you can decide for yourself. So yes, the mother is oppressive, but when you start to think about what happens to her, well, was she right to be worried? I think the cake thing, though, is a pretty good indicator. It's a bit of a tip off, probably, that she has something to do with it.
Yeah, I think there's such an obsession there for the Nina character to basically be an avatar for the Erica character because she didn't get to have these opportunities. And so she sort of by proxy doesn't want to miss another opportunity, I guess. But I was wondering if there was a mental health issue before the start of the film, and it seems like there was because she has to put the socks on her hands and says she was scratching. So I assume, there was some kind of OCD or something before the beginning of the film. But again, yeah, it's like chicken or the egg. I mean, did the Erica character create that, or was that something that
Right.
happened?
Because there was two
Uh,
things. So the cake scene makes you think that Erica definitely has a hand in it. But then at the end, I mean, her mother is the one that tells her, you need to stop doing this. This isn't healthy for you. So, is that a realization that she has that she's pushed it too far? Or is it something that she's always felt? So that's what I mean. It plays with these ideas that depending on the scene, you feel differently about the mother because eventually she realizes that this is not healthy and something has to be done. But by then it's too far gone. So yeah, it does a good job of not really giving you a perfect answer to anything.
I think that's like one element of many that create like a duality in this film, and an ambiguity to that duality. Like what is right, what is wrong, what is real, what is made up. And I think, my take on it is that there are little bits of both in everything. So there's a bit of reality in the Lily character, but then of course, after the night at Nina's apartment, Lily's like, "What are you talking about?" So obviously she wasn't there. And then the stuff with the Erica character, like some of that is probably real and maybe some of it isn't.
I was
I
just gonna
think the
say that.
farther you get,
Yeah,
yeah.
it just hit me where I'm starting to wonder, right, do we know that even all the interactions with her mother, do we know that those are real either? Because everything that we see is through Nina's point of view, and I hadn't thought about that till just now. So even with that, when you have an unreliable narrator that is your point of view for the whole movie, how do you even know what you're seeing is real or not?
And it's really every scene. I mean, it's just she's so unreliable to herself and to the story, and that's what makes it super interesting. And that's the thing that I think Aronofsky does to some degree in all of his films. Maybe not to this level because there's such a psychology to this, but and even in Requiem for a Dream, I don't know that Jared Leto's character is necessarily unreliable. He's just probably not like a good guy. But in Pi, the Max character, I mean, it's the same as this. Like he's going mad. I mean, you don't really know what's reality and what isn't. So it's it's really kind of like at its apex here in Black Swan, all the stuff that Aronofsky was leading up to, and I really love the execution of it because it's unsettling and it's so confusing, and it's just excellent. I really enjoy this film a lot. I know you'll never watch it again, but I'll probably watch it 3 or 4 more times. So because
No,
I
no,
just
I
have
said
a
I
lot
would
of
never
fun with it.
watch Requiem for a Dream ever again. This
Oh,
one,
okay.
this one, maybe, maybe.
Yeah. It's I find it to be a lot of fun and one part of the film that is so important to it is the visuals, and the cinematographer is Matthew Libatique, who shoots all of Aronofsky's stuff, but he also shoots a ton of stuff all around Hollywood. He shoots, all of Bradley Cooper's films, like Star is Born, Maestro. He shot Iron Man 2. So he's like all over the place. Don't Worry, Darling. And he's so good at adapting to what a director's vision is and bringing his style to it in the form of what that director wants. And he and Aronofsky, I mean, they just do everything together, and it's so important here, and there's so many interesting shots throughout, and like, there are mirrors everywhere to kind of symbolize, like, the fractured identity and reflections and everything, and, I mean, that's all in the camera, and I just think it's so smart the way those visual elements lead to a psychological story, and it's just really cool. I mean, it's a great collaboration, really well directed, I think, in that way.
Yeah. I had actually forgotten that I don't know if we're jumping around. I'd forgotten that Winona Ryder was in this movie. And this is
Yeah.
kind of a I mean, Stranger Things kind of helps put her back on the map, which I think is well deserved. I always thought Winona Ryder was a great actress, and I had forgotten she was in this, and she's really good in it. Um, and I really like that character that she plays in this because, again, it creates that sense of doubt where you're seeing what happens to her and how Nina takes it, but again, then the interaction that she has with Nina, we're not really sure what is happening there at all. Um, but it's clear that she is uh, having a breakdown as well. So then you start to think, well, maybe Nina's not wrong. Maybe this is stuff being put on her from the outside, but not really. So yeah, as you find yourself questioning your own thoughts almost the entire movie because it keeps you off kilter.
Yeah, and you don't know if Winona Ryder, even the interactions with her, like, did they really happen? Did she
Right.
stab herself in the face? Does she, I mean, there's so much
But
stabbing
she's
in this
holding
film.
right, and she ends up holding the bloody nail file. So did she stab her in the face?
Yeah.
I mean,
Is there a
that's
bloody nail?
right, right. Well, yeah, she's in drops on the floor. I mean, my assumption, my first thought was, is she the one that stabbed her? Yeah, I don't. But you're right because there's blood in the other part with Lily, and you realize that didn't even happen. So yeah, it really yeah, it plays with your mind quite a bit. It's very effective in making you question your own eyes the whole time.
Winona Ryder in particular, I think, does well, maybe Natalie Portman too, to a degree, but Winona Ryder does a great job with the melodrama of the film because it's very melodramatic and almost like comical in a way, like the heightened acting that especially Winona Ryder does, but also Natalie Portman. And uh, that kind of adds an element of fun to it and a little bit of camp, I think, that might not be there if they didn't go so big with those performances. But clearly, Natalie's performance was right on the money because she won an Oscar against some pretty big heavyweights in the category this year. So, it's a great portrayal, and I mean, she's so good at carrying a film. And this is kind of a time when it's more of a departure for her of what we know from her. Like a lot of the younger stuff feels like the Nina character is buttoned up persona in a way. And this is more of like, I mean, I know she did like Closer, the Mike Leigh film in 2004, where she was a stripper, but it still feels like Natalie Portman from Beautiful Girls or something in a way. And this is a little more like adult Natalie. And I think that's perfect for this idea of like going from the white swan to the black swan, because that's kind of what she's doing. And I think she's just such a good fit for that.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's hard not to think about her being a young actress and trying to gain more agency as a grown up actress. And she talked about that. That's kind of what drew her to this role in the first place because they've been talking about it for years. And I think that part of it was that she needed to break out of that child actress that people knew her as. And yeah, she definitely breaks out of it here. I mean, she's very commanding presence. Yeah.
But she breaks out of it like mid-roll. That's what's so great about it is like she's still that person for most of it, and to an unsettling degree with the infantilization. I mean, her voice is kind of like a little girl's voice, and she calls the Erica character mommy. He picked me, mommy. Like that's super unsettling. I don't like that stuff at all. And yeah, then she just comes to life as like the black swan, and it's such a great transformation, and that final scene is so impactful because you've been building all this pressure up to, like, her needing to get a release, and then she finally does it and, apparently stabs herself. I mean, I don't know. Who knows what happens? But, yeah, we might as well talk about the ending because it's so ambiguous. Like, does she die? Does she really stab herself? Well, I guess she does because
She definitely stabbed
everybody.
herself. I mean, that seems true. But yeah, I mean, of course, then you're like, well, why wasn't she bleeding more when she was dancing, or the blood starts to spread after at the end? But like,
Yeah.
well, why wasn't it bleeding? Wasn't she bleeding before if she pulled the glass out? So again, I don't know. Um, and it ends with white light. So you're like, well, are those stage lights or are those death lights? It's true. I mean, until the very end, it totally off kilter. And I don't know. I'm not really sure. I'd like to think she survives, but even if she does, I'm pretty sure her ballet career is over.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I read is that initially Aronofsky wanted that to be period blood, and it would be that she's getting her period for the first time and becoming a woman, because I guess it's like stunted for athletes, they don't quite get a period on the same schedule as non-athletes. And she wasn't comfortable with that, so they had to rewrite it to be that
Natalie
she
Portman wasn't
stabbed
comfortable
herself.
with it?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I agree with her. I'm not comfortable with it either. I'm really glad they didn't do that. That would not
yeah.
have been satisfying as an ending.
That's really like a Carrie moment. I
Yeah.
think it would be. Speaking of Carrie, actually, there was a little controversy in this because the woman who did a lot of the dancing, her name was Sarah. I can't remember her last name. I can look it up, but she was like the body double for Natalie Portman. And she did one interview where she said that a lot of the wide shots were her dancing. And the producers reached out to her and said, don't do any more interviews until the Oscars, because they wanted to present the narrative that Natalie did most of the dancing so she would win. And so this woman was really kind of like, Sarah Lane was her name, and was really kind of slighted by, the filmmakers and not given her due. And I say, speaking of Carrie, because it reminds me a lot of The Exorcist, where the woman who did a lot of the vocalizations for Reagan was completely cut out of any kind of credit for it. And she went on to sue Friedkin and like Paramount. So it's this really interesting thing of like these people who do a lot of the work not getting any recognition, which kind of sucks.
Yeah. And also it plays into the uncomfortable aspect of the digital effects, and the fact that Aronofsky's doing a movie totally in AI kind of shows you that maybe he has less concern about this than we do. But yeah, I mean, in the making of documentary, they even show you some of the visual effects that do the face map over the original dancer to put Natalie Portman's face on it. So they do admit that that was done. They just don't say how much. But yeah, it's pretty uncomfortable when you realize how easily they can put someone's face on someone else's body and make pretend that that other person isn't doing anything. And I can't imagine that AI is going to make that any better.
Definitely not. And I mean, this was 2010, so, or probably 2009 when they were shooting it. So it's I don't know if that was before or after Blue Crush, but that was the first time I remember they pretty poorly digitized a surfer and put Kate Bosworth's face on her. Do you remember that? It's
I
really
do.
bad.
Yeah.
That would have been 2003-ish, 2 or 3, I think. So they've been doing it for a while, and it didn't get too much better. We can wrap this up. I just really quickly want to mention Mila Kunis, who plays Lily. Natalie suggested her for the role, and she didn't even really have to audition. I mean, she just did a Zoom call with Aronofsky and got it. And I think that she's such a good fit for this because just like energetically, she feels like such an opposite to Natalie Portman to me. And I think it's just really great foresight on Portman's part to suggest her, and it works out really, really well. I want to mention Vincent Cassell too, because I feel like he's perfect for this because he always seems like, I don't know, kind of a dick.
Yes. Yeah, he's one of those guys that is really good at playing someone slightly creepy and kind of a jerk. Yeah, he's very
Yeah.
good at it.
Yeah, and that's just great casting too. I always love seeing him and stuff, even though I don't know that I like him necessarily, but he's pretty great. Did you have anything else you want to talk about with this before we go on to Whiplash?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I begrudgingly went to go see Black Swan or seeing Requiem for a Dream and be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm good. Even at the time, yeah, I just think it's a mesmerizing, work of filmmaking. I really do. The camera. I think what we didn't mention is how well the camera actually films the dancing and moves
Yes.
throughout on the stage. I found all that to be really exhilarating to be in the middle of it. I hadn't really seen it like that before. and it's even right out of the gate at the very beginning of the movie. Well, when you're filming that dream sequence. So you know, and the closeness of the way the camera kind of centers on people. A lot of it is close-up shots. I mean, you have this beautiful ballet, but even that is like it's weaving throughout them as they're moving around amongst each other, and you have these great close-ups. It's just yeah, it's really memorable the way that it is shot.
It reminded me a little bit of the way the fight scenes are shot in Creed, because that was such a unique way to put you in the ring that you didn't see in like Rocky or any boxing films like that. And it's just like this fluid movement in and out, and it really creates like a feeling like you're there. And I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this. A lot of the shots are of Natalie's character from behind. You see the back of her head, which is, generally used to put you in her point of view. So, yeah, I mean, it makes you feel in those dance scenes like you're there with her, and it's really great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think both movies do a really good job of helping to put you in a person's mind, but also in their perspective. Both movies do a lot of work of close up shots. And I was going to say that I rarely notice things like this. As I said, you're much more the technical camera guy than I am, but they both use whip pans really well. Like,
Yeah.
very effective use of the whip pan. So both movies have that in common.
Yeah, they do it, that attack it scene in this, where in the and I think that's in the behind the scenes thing where they show him like spinning the camera, and you just get that sense of it, and it's so cool. And then, yeah, we'll talk about it in Whiplash too, because I'll just say it now, where they cut, specifically where they whip between Fletcher and Andrew at the end. Like it cuts over to Fletcher and he's just doing his little hand things, and then Miles is doing a fill. Really, really good. Yeah, those pans in both films are just sensational. And that's the thing. Another aspect of this is that they're both so technically proficient, and they do a lot of the same tricks, but in very different styles. And I think that's just another element of how interestingly these films are in conversation. And I really love it.
It goes to part of the conversation we always have too, that you don't need $200 million to make an interesting movie. That both of these movies were shot on very small budgets, but when you have talented people behind the camera doing inventive things, it doesn't really matter what the budget is. I mean, Black Swan was shot for 10 million and Whiplash was like $3 million, and it does not feel that way.
Do you know what Black Swan's box office gross was? So the budget was between 10 and $13 million, as you said. $130 million. That is astronomical. That blew my mind when I saw it.
I would love to know what drew people to this movie. It doesn't feel like a movie that people would rush to go see. I find that really shocking. I think, unfortunately, nowadays it wouldn't make even close to that much money. I guess it was just a period of time where people were, whether it was Natalie Portman or they were just anxious to go see an interesting ballet movie. I have no idea. I mean, we know Timothée Chalamet wouldn't have gone to see this movie, but I wonder who was going to see it.
Yeah, he certainly wouldn't support it. But that's a staggering number for something. I mean, just like how in the black they are on the ledger is amazing. And
it got, I think that what it allowed, I think it got Aronofsky his blank check as well, which then he was able to make Noah, which was the movie that he really had been wanting to make, for better or worse. But so clearly one led to the other. He would never have been given that budget to make Noah.
It's really impressive. And Whiplash, we'll move on to that. But that had a $30 million budget and it only made 50. So ultimately it only really broke even. So
I thought Whiplash's budget was only like 3.3 million.
You know what? I forgot the decimal. Sorry. Yeah, Whiplash budget of 3.3 million and it made 50. So it didn't break even. It actually still made money, but it was not as big of a success, but still quite impressive.
But in all honesty, whatever people think of ballet, I mean, watching a dancing movie versus a movie that's about drumming and that ends with like a extended drum solo isn't exactly going to bring tons of people to the seats. I'm actually really
Yeah.
impressed that movie made that much money too.
What I find interesting is that both of these films, I mean, we're kind of moving into the comparison, I guess, but, uh, like we said, it's such a similar story, but one is from a woman's perspective and one is from a man's perspective. And it's interesting to me that if you have two films telling a very similar story, albeit in different fields, and one of them is led by a man and one is led by a woman, that the one led by a woman is going to make that much more money. That's really fascinating to me.
Well, I part of me thinks that, I mean, the Natalie Portman factor has to be taken into account. I do think that, I mean, I feel like she would bring people to the seats, and that's certainly possible. Um, but you're right. Yeah, it's nice to see that, and I do just wonder if both of these movies came out today, like how they would even do, or how you would be able to put them out.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. I mean, they're such small films. They're both very contained and sort of isolated. And uh, I don't know. I think you could see a studio like Focus or something doing this today. I mean, would it amount to
Maybe,
anything?
or
I don't
putting it
know.
straight to streaming. I mean, who knows? It's really
Yeah.
hard to know how these movies would be distributed now.
I mean, I could actually see both of these as A24 films. In fact, I mean, when I think about it, it really. That reminds me, Whiplash, which we're moving on to now, uh, produced by Jason Blum and Blumhouse, which you always think of as a horror producer, but people forget, there was a time when they
I
were
did see that, and then I did a
all
little
over
bit of a
stuff.
deep dive into that and realized that
Yeah.
apparently Blumhouse also produced The Tooth Fairy with The Rock.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Its own horror movie.
more diverse than we thought. Who knew?
Yeah. They also produced, what is it? The Uma Thurman movie. Not My Super Ex Girlfriend, but The Accidental Husband with Jeffrey Dean Morgan. They produced that a couple years before this. So, yeah, more diverse than people think. Jason Blum and his crew.
Yeah, and in terms of
Yeah,
Whiplash, was Jason Reitman had a lot to do with getting this movie produced as well.
yeah, yep,
And I guess that may
yeah,
be how J.K. Simmons ends up coming into it, because he directed him in Juno, and then I believe that it was Reitman that suggested J.K. Simmons for Whiplash, so that makes sense.
yeah. It does make sense. It's all like connected, which is awesome. All right, well, let's move on to Whiplash for real. Written and directed by Damien Chazelle. As we said, $3.3 million budget. Also, 5 Oscar nominations, 2 wins, actually 3 wins for supporting actor for J.K. Simmons, best editing, and best sound mixing. Let me give you a quick overview. Andrew Naiman is an ambitious young jazz drummer in pursuit of rising to the top of his elite music conservatory. Terrence Fletcher, an instructor known for his terrifying teaching methods, discovers Andrew and transfers the aspiring drummer into the top jazz ensemble, forever changing the young man's life. But Andrew's passion to achieve perfection quickly spirals into obsession as his ruthless teacher pushes him to the brink of his ability and his sanity. I mean, it sounds like an overlay almost of Black Swan, right? Like that you have these ambitious people pushed to the brink. Uh, I would argue that the Leroy character in Black Swan isn't quite as pushy as the Fletcher character here, but
No, I also
still,
think that the important distinction to make here, yeah, is that Black Swan is also a movie about mental illness, where that's not really what Whiplash is. Of course, I mean, he's not diagnosed with any mental illness. I mean, you could argue whether or not his single-minded obsession is a mental illness in and of itself. But yeah, that is a bit of the difference, where it's not just a black and white, two ambitious people kind of thing. Nina's dealing with a bit more.
yeah, this is a very straightforward story. I mean, it's all, there are like psychological elements to it in a way because it's that ambition that's driving Andrew, but ultimately it's an exterior story and it's very just sort of A to B.
Yeah,
And
I was going to say this to you. This is what I want to talk about this movie because I was talking about this with my son who actually loves Whiplash, and his interpretation of it was not really mine. So his feeling always was the movie is really about that um, Neiman wasn't necessarily driven to be the person that he ends up being at the end of the movie. That is actually Fletcher that pushes him to get there. And my feeling always was that there's just no way that what Fletcher saw in him was that obsession that he thought that there was something he could bring out a little more, but I think it's already there. And there are certain scenes in the movie that show you that he's willing to kind of get rid of everything and focus singularly on being the best drummer he can be. And I was curious. I do think that's open for interpretation. You can go either way, but I always felt like it was already there within him, and Fletcher just recognized it.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly has that drive. I mean, he's always listening to Buddy Rich. He's always listening to all of these things, and he has the picture of Buddy Rich, which, I mean, that doesn't necessarily indicate you're like a crazy person about drumming, but he knows the song from like the 40s when he goes to get pizza with Nicole. And so it's clear that there's just this passion there, at least. I mean, maybe what Fletcher sees as the ability to go along with the passion, or like a seedling of that he has to cultivate. I don't know, but I think that tension is, yeah. What I wanted to say this earlier, but what's great is that both of these films tell you exactly what's going to happen and what you're watching inside of like a metatextual story that the instructor tells. So Vincent Cassell tells the story of the Black Swan, which is basically what we're watching unfold on screen. And J.K. Simmons, the Fletcher character, tells him the story of Charlie Parker, which is basically what you're seeing Andrew go through. I mean, he literally throws a chair at his head after he tells him somebody threw a symbol at Charlie Parker to get him kickstarted. So they're laying out the entire film for you, which I think is so clever and really fun. And you can look back on it if you might not know it in the moment and see, okay, they told us exactly where we're going. And I just kind of love that about it. And I think that, the Fletcher character, you have to question his methods, of course, but even
You
he
think?
questions like, I mean, look, I don't know, maybe I'm cynical and a little dark,
No,
but
I agree with you. This is what I really like about this movie too, much like Black Swan. Black Swan keeps you off kilter for a slightly different reason, but Whiplash, you're supposed to think that Fletcher is a monster. I mean, you are, and Damien Chazelle has gone out of his way to make that clear. But you also have to think about yourself and feel like it's always that idea of how far you're supposed to push someone to get greatness. And this is an argument that's gone on forever. And it, at the speech that Fletcher gives about trying to find the next Charlie Parker, I mean, there's a certain part of you that agrees with that. I'm sure there are some people that don't, but I think that most of us think there's a kernel of truth in that somewhere, that you need someone to push you past what you think you're capable of doing. The question is, how do you do it? But yeah, and of course, we know the history of most things, especially in the arts. And a lot of stuff comes out even now to this day about how terrible certain people were. Buddy Rich was terrible, supposedly. I
yeah.
mean,
Oh
there's
yeah.
stories about all of these people. George Balanchine, the guy that ran the ballet, the New York City Ballet, which is one of the most. I mean, he's so famous that even I know who he is, and I don't follow ballet at all. It's like everybody knows that name, but supposedly he was terrible. It's like we know this, so. And I think there are people that argue nowadays that pushing people less is going to give us art that is less great. And I don't know, that's not an argument for me to make one way or the other, but this is the constant argument that we will always have. And Whiplash does a great job of just presenting that to you and having you think having to decide for yourself what you think is right.
Yeah, I guess you have to ask, like, where is the line, and can you is it okay to go over it if you know what the result is going to be? Or is it like, I mean, I'm somebody who all I want in this world is for everybody to reach their potential and to get the things they're going after. It makes me so happy when people do that. But I don't know if everybody's like destined to do that. And maybe they are if they have a mentor who pushes them out of their comfort zone a little bit. I haven't seen Michael, but is that the Joe Jackson approach? I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. And Joe Jackson considered a monster too. And look what that wrought. But
Yeah,
look, I will say that I think about this a lot more now that I'm a parent. When I was in my 20s,
sure.
I didn't think about it much at all. But I think about it all the time now because you're always constantly kind of pushing and pulling as to how far to push your own kids to be great at something. Because it's something you're with, you see a spark in them, you see something that they're naturally good at, or you see something like that. And the question is, well, how how much do I want to push this? Like, will it work or will it backfire? And you never know. And every kid has that kind of story about how they started an instrument and they hated it, but their parents forced them to do it, and then eventually they become great. So I don't know, right? You never are really sure how far to push anyone, and your kids are a great example of that. But then you look back and you're like, well, you'll appreciate it later, but how much do you want to force them in the moment to get through that?
It seems I'm not a parent, so I don't have that experience, but I have nieces and nephews who I watch doing amazing things, and it's not my place to like try to mentor them in that way, but I always support them in everything they do, even when most people around them don't, because they're so creative and they want to go after this thing, and everybody else is saying that's ridiculous. But I think like, well, why not try it? And maybe if you had a mentor who was more aligned with that, you might get there. I don't know, but I think you can get to that point, I guess. Like you can achieve that thing if a mentor pushes you in that way, but are you sacrificing other things for that one thing? Like it seems like Andrew, has sacrificed relationships. He's sacrificed all of this stuff in order to focus on that one thing. And,
He very
Nina doesn't
clearly,
too.
and that's what in this instance, the relationship with the parent. We think about the one in Black Swan. And this one is slightly different in that. And in this one, what you see is that his father really has no connection to his drive or is trying to live through him or anything. And I think it's a really nice dynamic to see because what you see is his father. The look at the end, again, is open for interpretation. He's looking at his son doing this, and some people look at that and see that as someone who is kind of astounded by what their child is achieving in that moment. That's not how I saw it at all. I mean, the look on his face I saw was just kind of one of horror. Like, I think that he was just almost stunned at the monster that was kind of being created in front of him. And I know, and the reason I think this is true is I found out that there was actually a deleted scene, that the sequence where he walks off the stage and goes to his father was longer, and a security guard actually comes back there because the father kind of busted through to get backstage to comfort his son. And the security
Right.
guard asks Damien, it's like, do you know this guy? And he says, no, I don't. And then he walks away. So it's like he
Oh,
renounces his father to go be with Fletcher in a way and to chase this. And so it's like the look on his father's face, I think, is one of kind of shock and horror almost at what's happening, as opposed to being impressed. And it's the thing, I saw it that
interesting.
way initially anyway, but now knowing the scene that was cut out, I think that's absolutely true.
That's really interesting because one of the things I noticed is that there's a moment, I think it's when they have the family dinner, where Paul Reiser says his opinion means a lot to you, doesn't it? And then they proceed to have that dinner where Andrew is basically above his family and like putting down all of their accomplishments because of what he's doing with Fletcher. So that feels like a moment where you really get to see him shifting from being with his dad to being with Fletcher. So that's interesting that scene was cut out. It almost feels like it would validate that idea going
Yeah, they thought it was
forward.
a little heavy handed, so they took it out. But I mean, I kind of yeah,
You
I
get it
was able to
anyway.
see the look on that face. It just kind of that's what I saw. But there's other subtle ways. I mean, you notice that midway through the movie, he's wearing black t-shirts, just like Fletcher. So
Yeah.
you know, there's all these little things that you see that he's slowly becoming him. And they are more of a perfect pair than we think. We start off thinking that Fletcher is just the bad guy, but in a way, you start to realize that Neiman is more like him than either he or we want to admit at the beginning. And whether or not that's good or bad is up for us. We have to make a decision for ourselves. But yeah,
I have to say, maybe this says a lot about me, but I never see Fletcher as a bad guy necessarily. I mean, are his methods extreme? Yes. Did he push one student to hang themselves? Sure. But ultimately, I don't know.
look,
I get
again, I
it
don't
a
think
little bit.
that's, yeah, I'm not judging you for that either. And I think that you and I, based on our age and where we came from, that's what we understand as well. It's kind of what we've always seen is like, well, that's what you have to do. You have to push yourself well past your point of comfort to achieve greatness. And we hear all those stories, you hear Michael Jordan stories, and you hear even the Michael Jackson story, obviously, and whether or not you agree with any of that stuff. But this is what we've always been told. So that's we don't see it as extreme as possibly someone younger than us looking at this now and realizing there can be a different way.
Well, like I said earlier, there's a sacrifice to be made, externally for that focus. And Tiger Woods is a great example of that. I mean, we just saw him again, getting into trouble with substance abuse. And that's the kind of thing I was talking about is like he was so good at that one thing and had so much pressure on him that it's almost like everything else, there's no skill level, it to function in the world outside of that. And, it makes me think of the program too. The Alvin Mack character, remember he was like, "I'm going to the NFL," and then he breaks his leg, and what do you do after that? So, yeah, there's such a history of this. I'd be curious, what the reception would have been to Terrence Fletcher if this film were released in like 1984
Yeah,
versus 2014, because
yeah,
that's a whole different world.
it's true. I will say
Yeah, it would
though,
have been
what
really
I kept thinking as I was watching this movie is that it's very rare that you get to see the psyche of a filmmaker laid bare. And it made me realize how easy it is to see where his career was going, if that makes any sense. Like some because this is autobiographical in a way, and he was singularly obsessive about drums until he became obsessed with film. But based on knowing that this is something that he went through, watching him jump from Whiplash to La La Land to Babylon, which is a crazy undertaking of kind of the progression of the difficulty of filmmaking, it makes perfect sense in a way that he would have absolutely no fear about jumping to something as giant as Babylon. And whether or not he failed at it, I personally like Babylon, to be honest. And I'm
very
more than like
divisive
even like
film.
in the movie, I love the swing. I just love the ambition of Babylon. And watching Whiplash makes it clear that that is what he is going to do, because if he's going to take filmmaking on, he's going to do it in the most insane way possible. It's kind of rare you get to put those pieces together by watching someone's film, but I think that Whiplash very much does that.
Yeah, it's really a progressive widening of the aperture for him as you look at his filmography. I mean, this is so contained and so focused on these two characters. And La La Land similarly is focused on these two characters, but it's in Los Angeles. It's this like the world of jazz basically, and there's more of an ensemble to it. But then Babylon is like all of Hollywood forever, and it's
Right.
just
It's
so
just the scope
big.
of it is
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, he really just gets bigger and
But
bigger,
yeah,
and
but after
and for
seeing
better
like,
or
well,
worse.
this is what he went through. Yeah, sure, he would take on Babylon, no problem, and be convinced that he can do it. I mean, that is what jumps out at me.
What you see here, since we're talking about him, is really a style of filmmaking that's gonna just get more and more honed in as you go forward. I mean, there's a lot of color, there are a lot of really interesting shots, from a lot of different perspectives. And visually, as a storyteller, I'm really impressed with what he does because there's so much emotion in, especially the color grading in this film. I mean, it's primarily like orange in the studio and in the performances, and I mean, to me, that feels like tension and heat, like it's kind of hot, and then everything else is mostly green, and that's sort of like anxiety and envy, and it's just very heavy-handed with those 2 colors, and I think that gets toned down a little bit going forward with La La Land and Babylon, but they're still just really lush-looking films, and all of the colors says so much about what they do, and I think that's really, smart filmmaking, and I think it's conveying another element of psychology to the story that isn't on paper necessarily, but it's really interesting, and it really does a lot of work here.
Yeah, you're right. The other thing I would say is that what he does well is he films a lot of reaction shots. And there's a lot of that in Whiplash. Even when someone's speaking, and not necessarily even focusing on the person who's speaking, you're focusing on the people who are reacting to that person speaking. Uh, that's a good choice in this movie, particularly. But you also need good actors to pull it off, and that's the perfect segue I can think of to move into the actors themselves. J.K. Simmons obviously wins the Academy Award, but I think that Miles Teller, I think it's an underrated performance. I think that he is really excellent in this movie.
I think it's the perfect performance. It's the perfect role for him because to me, he's never had like that movie star quality that leading men can have. He's always just felt like an everyman put in front of the camera, and I think that's perfect for the Andrew Neiman role here. So it's great casting. I was trying to think of other people who might work as well in that role, and I don't know if there really is anybody because he has just enough like charisma, but not a lot, you know?
Right. Yeah. But as I said, I think that he what makes him so good in this role is that he spends a lot of time reacting to things. And there is all these subtle things he does with his face, the way he reacts to things that Fletcher says, or things that he sees, or and all of those things are, they may pass you by without you even recognizing it. The small little smiles, but those things really make the role for me. And I think he does an excellent job of conveying a lot with just a glimmer of a look on his face.
That's an incredibly important aspect of this because of what the Fletcher character is. I mean, he's a dick, but how Andrew responds is what is so important in that dialogue. I mean, because he can either respond with like terror and cry and like, I'm upset, like he does, or he can, respond with confidence. And I think in that is where you see the transformation, like the arc of the Andrew character,
You're 100%
because
right.
when we get to the end of the film, I'll spend 20 minutes talking about this last scene because I think it's one of the best endings I've ever seen in a movie because you have well, you know what? I'm going to save it because
Well,
I
I'll
want to
I'll
talk about
jump in then and save that
yes.
part because I'm going to say is even
Yeah.
before the end, there's the two scenes in the rehearsal room on the drum kit, and the first one is the I'm upset scene where he basically just
Yeah.
completely destroys him. But the second time, when he brings in the other two drummers and he's trying to get all three of them to play that one part, and then he sends everybody out of the room. Notice that in that scene, he's no longer upset. It actually looks like he's angry. Like he's mad that not only someone's trying to take his part, but that the way Fletcher is acting, like he's no longer showing any fear. And that to me is like the subtle switch over. And from that point on, you start to see that he's no longer afraid. Then they have the blow up later, and but that moment, those two scenes juxtapose really well. And again, it's subtle in just the look that Miles Teller has on his face, but you know that he's no longer as intimidated as he was.
I think that is like the beginning of a little run in the film where that ends with the car crash because to this point you have so much pressure building up on Andrew. And I think that car crash, which kind of changes everything because he's done, like, I think that's like a pressure release valve. And he realizes he no longer feels the pressure of being in the conservatory, no longer feels the pressure of Fletcher. It like lets it all out. And yeah, I think that scene that you're talking about is like the beginning of that. Like he's building that confidence, but he's still confident inside of this pressure cooker. And then the car crash and like the aftermath of that changes everything, and his life is different. And then that I think leads to the end, at the beginning of that scene where Fletcher screws him over basically in front of the elite in New York City who have the ability to like make or break his drumming career, essentially. Fletcher just does him in. And I think at the beginning of that, you have Andrew back in that pressure cooker, but then there's a switch and he's like post car crash Andrew. And it like gives me goosebumps to think about it, because what you see is not only him embarrassing Fletcher in front of those same people who he tried to embarrass Andrew in front of, but he like makes him his bitch. I mean, he picks up Andrew's symbol, and that is like it to me. You have him helping Andrew, and then Andrew's like, I'll cue you. And then Fletcher's like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for.
Right.
Takes his jacket off. That's where the whip pans come in, where he's conducting. Andrew does the fills. It is like a monumental moment of like taming this beast that has been such an adversary for the entire film. It's like he took a dog to like training classes or something, and now that he like obeys. I just think it's such a great ending. And it totally throws the rest of the film on its ear. Everything you saw of that dynamic, it just completely flips it. And it's so, so cool. Did you have anything else you want to talk about with Whiplash?
Yeah,
We
just
didn't
a
spend
couple of
quite as
things.
much
You
time
talked
on
about
this.
the scene leading up to the car crash and that whole sequence with the bus. This is another thing I noticed, but then I ended up hearing about it. And I always bring up people stealing from Goodfellas because everybody does. And I will say this till the day I die. Like, I don't think any movie's been more influential in the last 30 years than Goodfellas. Sorry. And Damien Chazelle even said that whole sequence of the ratcheting up is kind of like the behavior of an addict. And that's the way he wants it to seem, that he's addicted to this idea. And it keeps ratcheting up and ratcheting up. And he said that he took that pacing directly from the final scene in Goodfellas. And I'm like, I know you did, because I definitely recognize that. I was just wanted to say that. The other thing I
That's
wanted to
all?
say that I noticed that I was thinking about is, whatever happened to bucket drummers in New York?
Yeah.
There's a scene where he's walking and they have the bucket drumming. You remember how big bucket drumming was for a little while? They were
There was that one
everywhere.
kid.
But
It
back in
was
the
like in
day, I
a
mean, you
Levi's
couldn't
commercial
pass,
or something.
you couldn't go 3 blocks in New York City without seeing bucket drumming.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah.
subway, it was huge. Where did all the bucket drummers go?
No, that's a good question. But there was like one famous one, right? Some kid, I
Yeah,
remember.
I don't know if that was him in the movie, but yeah, there were a couple that actually got famous from bucket drumming. I remember, like, it was a big thing, and it's something I completely forgot about until I watched this movie again. I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, that was a big thing.
That boy, that was a different time.
Now, not
Maybe
everybody just smokes marijuana in the streets now. They don't bucket drum anymore.
don't get me started. Jesus. Yeah, maybe De Blasio moved them all out.
I don't know who killed the bucket drummer.
This feels like an expose that we need to investigate. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, let's move on to our head-to-head comparison, because as we've been establishing, these are so similar with so many differences that it's really fun to kind of look at them together. And as far as story effectiveness goes, I mean, which one tells almost the same story in a different way? It's basically
So
the question.
yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think that I have to say Whiplash is probably more effective just because it's more of a linear story. I think because Black Swan, and I think it's deliberate though. I think that Black Swan doesn't want to be linear or be that easy as a story. That's just not something Darren Aronofsky is going to give you. So on purpose. I think it's less effective in its storytelling.
See, I was kind of leaning that way too, because I think the writing, Damien Chazelle wrote Whiplash, and it feels like jazz. The pace of the film. I mean, it's so quick and it's so like kinetic, and that's great. I love that. And I think Black Swan slows it down slightly and kind of builds, but I love the little flourishes in Black Swan, like the little detours into like psychology land and like the craziness and the just the ambiguity of what reality is or not. So I don't know. I mean, I think they're both really good at telling a very similar story in their own unique styles. So I think I'm going to call it a tie just because I really love the way both of them unfold in their own unique ways. I don't think I can pick a winner here. I think it's too close to call for me because I love them both.
I will not hold that against you. That's totally fair.
What about characters?
Yeah, that is that's hard. This one, I would almost lean more towards saying that it's a tie because I mean, both movies have very few characters, but they are really strong, effective characters. I mean, you really have. I mean, Black Swan really has 3 characters, and Whiplash, well, maybe 4, and maybe Whiplash has 3 main characters. So yeah, I lean more towards a tie in this case.
Okay. To me, I think the characters in Whiplash are the characters. You know what they are. That like they're wearing their hearts on their sleeve, basically. Like you get what you expect. But I think in Black Swan, the characters are a little more ambiguous, and that makes them really interesting to me because they're not what I would call like really drawn out characters. Just because you don't know, because you're seeing it from Nina's point of view, who these characters actually are. You don't know if what you're seeing is that real character or if they're somebody that she made up. And so there's something to be said for that too. What am I basing this on? Am I basing this on the actual character who I don't really know? Or am I basing it on Nina's interpretation of these characters who are all over the place? So it's hard to say. I think because of that ambiguity and because of the stripped down uh, effectiveness of the Whiplash characters, I'm going to go Whiplash on this, just because they're so drawn out. Whereas I don't know what I'm looking at with Black Swan in the best possible way, but because of that, I can't I can't pick it. All right, let's move on to tone and consistency. I think this falls for me under the same umbrella as characters in what I think about them.
Yeah, again, it's hard to do this with Black Swan because it's almost like
Yeah.
it flies in the face of all these questions because I think it's doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Tone and consistency, I think it's wildly inconsistent because the main
Absolutely.
character is inconsistent. I think it's supposed to be. But by default, Whiplash is obviously much better at this.
100% agree. I mean, that it's exactly what you said. I mean, you can't have a tone with somebody like unraveling mentally and have it be consistent. So that makes perfect sense. What about cultural staying power and iconic scenes? Both of these films have Oscars and are kind of in the zeitgeist a little bit.
Yeah, I
Tough
think
one.
that's geez. I don't know. The only reason I would have to say Whiplash now is because again, like my son discovered Whiplash a couple of years ago and became completely obsessed with it. It's like his favorite movie. He watches it. He's watched it like 10 times. Like he's really into it. So in my household, Whiplash has a lot more staying power.
Did he shave his head and put on black t-shirts? Because then you'll know what's in
No.
store in the future. For me, I think, Natalie Portman won Best Actress for this, and I think that brings a lot of weight to it and a lot of, like not legend, but I think it brings it into the culture a little more. There's the scene where in that like beautiful cinematography of the dancing where she comes up to the camera and has the yellow eyes or the red eyes or whatever. I mean, I think people think about that a lot. And the moment where she turns around in the mirror, which is such a kind of cliched scene, but you see that over and over again. There are a lot of gifs for that. Um, for Whiplash, all I really think about with Whiplash is him holding his fist up to stop the band and saying, "Not my tempo." Like, those are the two things that I recall from it.
There's a
And
lot
of
of
course, that
things in
ending.
Whiplash you can't repeat, so that's
Yeah. Yeah,
by
like
the
the
way,
thing
this may
about the
not be the time for
calculator.
this, but I forgot to mention it before. It really doesn't matter what I see J.K. Simmons in, but Whiplash is helpful in that regard. Like, he's played the father in Juno, he's the farmer's insurance guy, does a lot of voiceover work. If you've seen Oz, the old HBO prison show, there's just no possible way you can ever see J.K. Simmons and not think of Vern Schillinger, the character he played in that show. He plays like a
Mhm.
neo-Nazi who is just the worst human being ever. He's so genuinely scary and horrible, and that's the first thing I ever saw him in. So I just think about it all the time. Whenever I see him, like, how is Vern Schillinger selling insurance on TV? It just creeps me out. He was so effective in that show.
It's so
God,
funny you say that because I was thinking about him in the context of one of our questions about hanging out with somebody, and uh, he is such an interesting guy because even when he's nice, like in the scene where and perhaps it's the context of the film that I'm thinking this, but where Andrew goes to see him at the jazz club after he gets fired from the conservatory. And he's like relating to Andrew and he's really nice, but he's like a second away from exploding and just berating you. And I feel like that no matter what character he is, that's the energy. Is like at any moment he could go nuclear on you. So he's almost typecast in that way, right? Like that's what you want from
I don't
him,
know. He
and
has
that's what you
played
get.
some genuinely nice characters though. So if you look at his work, I mean, he's done a ton of work over like even the past decade. He's just everywhere. And he's played a lot of diverse characters. But I just can't get away from Vern Schillinger. It's just impossible for me. But also, what I discovered when looking into this is he studied music in college. Turns out
Yeah,
J.K.
yeah.
Simmons is he's like a Renaissance man. There's a lot of things.
I don't know why I've been doing this lately, but it's come up. But I keep mentioning the WTF podcast with Mark Maron, and there was a great episode with J.K. Simmons where he talks about like getting through the pandemic and driving across the country and just despite what I just said, he seems like a lovely guy, but I still feel like he would have jumped over the table at Mark at any moment during that interview. But yeah, again, go back and listen to that because he's really an interesting interview, and he did talk about studying music. Okay, what was your pick for that? It was Whiplash, right?
It
For
was.
cultural staying power. All right, I'm gonna look at these. Let's uh let's move on to the questions that we ask every week. These are questions that we ask one another to help narrow down if we don't already know where we're going to go, and they're just for fun. Which film is more rewatchable? I think I know where you're going with this one.
uh, I'm gonna have to go Whiplash as more rewatchable. And no shade of Black Swan. It just makes Darren Aronofsky movies just make me very uncomfortable.
You're not alone in that. I understand.
And I
Discomfort is
appreciate it.
where I
I know
live.
that's what he's here for. I get it.
Yeah,
He's a singular filmmaker. I understand.
he makes me uncomfortable in a different way with Noah and the things he did in that period. Like how you feel about Requiem for a Dream is probably how I feel about that period of his film. Uh, Yeah, again, I bought both of these on physical media, so, they're in the collection, and I'm gonna go back to both of them. I think because Whiplash moves so quickly, it's something that I would probably return to more often. You kind of have to sit and live in Black Swan a little more because it's a little slower pace, and there's a little more to think about with it. So, yeah, I think I'm with you. I think Whiplash is probably more rewatchable for
Plus,
me.
plus, I have to add my own biases, which is I'm someone that actually like goes on YouTube and watches Drumeo. Like I watch like drummers like perform drumming, like isolated drums. I just kind of enjoy drumming. So a movie that has a lot of drums in it, I'm here for that.
Do you watch those videos where it's like a professional drummer hears "Smells Like Teen Spirit" for
I
the
do
first
not.
time?
I do not watch those. I just watch like real
You know
like
that's a
there's
lie.
some good ones with famous drummers who kind of either are playing their most famous drum parts in isolation or the drummer from Anthrax has a couple of those, and I think he's a phenomenal drummer. Charlie Benante
Charlie
is his name.
Benante? Yeah.
Yeah, they have
Look at
they have a
us.
couple of tracks where he's just in a studio playing his own isolating drum tracks, and it's mesmerizing. He's really good at what he does.
Can I tell you the obsession I had with Among the Living when it came out? I mean, that
Really.
album, unbelievable. It was
Well,
so good.
go look up. There's a track. The track is called "Nobody Knows Anything." It was off the. It's a later album that they had made, but look up. There's a video of him doing the isolated drums for that. It's crazy because every measure, the drum pace increases. So it's like by the time he gets to the end of it, it's like just arms and feet flying everywhere. It's just, but he's completely contained the whole time he's doing it. It's almost effortless. It's really something to watch.
At any moment, does Joey Belladonna come in and say, "Not my tempo"?
He does not. I don't know if Joey Belladonna has a tempo, but that's a whole other story.
I can't believe I remember the names of the Anthrax players. That's crazy. Those guys really got me into comic books. I mean, they were so into comics like Judge Dredd and the Ninja Turtles. I mean, it's like early 80s
Yeah,
and
they did the
horror
sound. They
movies
did the
too.
song for a song for Judge Dredd. Yeah, absolutely. They were there. It's funny. Not to get off on a tangent, but yeah, Anthrax, particularly for us, it's like they introduced some people to hip hop because they were the first. They collaborated with
Right.
Public Enemy. I know Run DMC and Aerosmith did it, but to a lot of people, you remember that because Anthrax really embraced rap instead of like vice versa in a way. Aerosmith and Run DMC was Aerosmith. Run DMC kind of embracing their song, but Anthrax embraced Public Enemy. So brought a lot of people who made like metal into hip hop.
Yeah, and what a great entree into hip hop with Public Enemy. I mean, they almost have like a metal feel to them anyway, so that's a perfect
Exactly.
pairing. And then that probably launched the Judgment Night soundtrack, right? I mean, where everybody's doing that.
That's true.
Okay, we're really showing our age here. Would you want to hang out with anybody from either of these films?
100% no.
Yeah.
Maybe Neiman's dad. I like Mr. Neiman. He seems like a really nice guy. That's it. I like to go watch movies with Paul Reiser. That's it. That's the only person.
Can't deal with the milk duds and the popcorn though. Yeah,
It
it's not
wasn't
for
Milk
me.
Duds that he put in there. I put Milk Duds in my popcorn. It was not Milk
What
Duds.
was
It was
it?
Raisinets,
Oh,
which I would not put in
so
my popcorn. I put Milk Duds in my popcorn. So
okay. Yeah. I'm a purist. I gotta have just popcorn.
I understand.
Okay. This is interesting because I've been thinking about this a lot. Is this a career peak or valley for any of the main players? There's a lot of
Yeah,
arguments to make here.
there are quite a few arguments. I'm starting to lean towards it could be a peak for Aronofsky. I mean, it's obviously the most successful movie he's ever going to make. I believe that now. Like I may have questioned it a few years ago, but I really believe now that because of the landscape and because he seems to be making AI movies now, I don't think he'll ever make a movie as successful as Black Swan.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it was building to this, and this is sort of the crescendo of this collection of films that tell this story. And then going back to it with The Whale. I mean, I know Brendan Fraser won, but it wasn't received very well, like
Exactly.
any of these were. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else he has in him. But this, to this point, I think this is definitely the height of his career. What about J.K. Simmons? I mean, I know he does a lot of stuff, but he won an Oscar.
I know because he won an Oscar, we could say that it's possible, but yeah, I just feel like he's done so many things since then. I mean, he's played J.
Yeah.
Jonah Jameson and everything else. I mean, uh, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Where's that Oscar?
I know.
What about Natalie Portman? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, as
It's
much
such
as
a
I hate
hard
hate to
thing to
say
say.
that, you could be right there too. I I don't know if it's by choice or anything else. I mean, she has kind of scaled back her work. You know, she got
Yeah.
married. She met person she met obviously on this movie. Interestingly enough,
Her
um,
dance partner on this.
but yeah, I don't know. I'd hate to say that. I still think Natalie Portman has some great work in her, so I don't want to say that just yet.
Interestingly, there's a moment in this where in Black Swan where Natalie Portman or Mila Kunis grabs Natalie Portman's future husband's junk off stage and she sees it.
Yes.
And then she would go on to make that terrible movie No Strings Attached with Ashton Kutcher, who married Mila Kunis. So there's a weird sort of incestuous sort of thing there. Uh, yeah, I think it might be for her. I mean, she does interesting stuff, but I don't know. She might have been nominated for Jackie. I can't remember, but she wins the Oscar here, and it's one of those performances that you go all in on. One of those physical performances, and I think to date this is probably a peak for her. Are there bigger things to come? TBD, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought she was surprisingly effective in Jackie. Um,
Yeah.
I was surprised at how good she was in that, especially playing a character that you kind of feel like everybody tries. But she was really great in that movie. As far as Miles Teller goes, no, I feel like after Top Gun Maverick, I think there's another level for him. I do, but I will say, which I didn't know until I rewatched this movie, that Miles Teller was in La La Land. Like they were going to work together again. That was the plan, that he was going to star in La La Land, and they had talked about it, and he was moving forward with that. And then at the last minute, not really at the last minute, but yeah, Chazelle changed his mind and ended up going with Ryan Gosling. I think that's a really fascinating what if Miles Teller had stayed in La La Land.
I mean, there's no comparison.
I know.
Like,
I mean, there's not. It's just you can understand why he chose Gosling, but yeah, that's a really fascinating detour.
we might not have Babylon if Miles Teller were in La La. I mean, for better or worse, because that some people hate that movie. So I don't know. I don't know that he. I mean, I would argue a career highlight for anybody is working with Elizabeth Olsen, which he did on Eternity. But I don't know that a lot of the stuff that he was in, oh man, I'm just not a big fan, I guess. I don't see anything exceptional about him. I hate to say. I mean, he's serviceable as an actor, but uh, I did like him playing Al Ruddy in that FX show about The Godfather, the making of The Godfather. That was kind of fun. But yeah, I don't
Watching
know.
him play Michael Jackson's manager in Michael is not going to win him any points for me. Just to be clear.
Did you see that?
I have no
Did you go
intention
see
of seeing
it?
that movie. I would never go see that movie.
Yeah, same.
I don't want to get off on a rant
Yeah.
here. It goes against every single thing that I believe in about movies.
I hear you. Okay, let's move on. Here we go. Would one of these films be better if Steven Spielberg directed it?
Going no on this one.
I could see him making Black Swan, I have to say. I don't think it would be as dark as it is because I don't think he's capable of that, but I think that could be interesting.
I just want to see him making
No.
these movies. I mean, as we all say, Steven Spielberg can make any movie that he wants. Would it be better? I don't know if it would be better. There's just something that Aronofsky is able to bring to Black Swan that I don't think that Spielberg could really bring the same thing to it. And Whiplash is obviously such a personal story. I don't see Spielberg making that work.
Maybe we should change it to Steven Spielberg has to direct one of these films. Which one should it be? Maybe that's better.
That's actually good. Maybe we should change it.
Yeah. Okay. I will do that. All right. Last question. Would either film be better if you swapped lead actors? I mean, you can't, but maybe you could swap the mentors.
Totally think Natalie Portman could drum till she bleeds. I could see it.
Yeah. And, maybe Miles Teller, the spark I'm missing is because he's not wearing a tutu.
Maybe. It's possible.
Yeah. But what about Vincent
Hang on,
Cassell and
though.
J.K.
I would
Simmons?
love to see J.K. Simmons as the ballet director. I would
Yeah,
pay to see that.
that's what I'm saying. Maybe not Cassell as Fletcher, though. I don't think he has the intensity to
He
do. I
would
mean,
just be
he's a dick, but
passive aggressively dickish. It would be totally different.
yeah. Okay. So those are all of our questions. One thing left to do, and that's our poll results for our online voting. If you're not following us on social media, please do that. We're at Movie Throwdown Pod everywhere. And each week we throw up a poll and ask your opinion on these films. Which one do you think is better? This week, very, very close. Which one do you think won out?
I feel like I no longer have the pulse of the people, so I'm going to say the Black Swan one.
Okay. Very, very close. 22-20 this week in favor of Whiplash.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. Again, the newer films seem to always win no matter what. So I think that's interesting that, maybe that speaks to being in the culture a little more. I don't know. But yeah, very close. And in fact, on a lot of the platforms, it was actually tied all the way until I got to TikTok. So again, like younger people on TikTok, maybe they're more familiar with the newer film. Okay, so we total all of this up in our computer brains. And who's your winner for this week?
Whiplash is my winner of the week. I actually like the movie more than I remember.
Okay. Yeah, I think
To be honest, just to say, I think I like them both more than I remembered. To be honest, I ended up enjoying Black Swan more than I thought I would. But yeah, I just think Whiplash is a little more of a better movie for me.
Okay. I think that they're very close for me, just like the voting online, but I'm going to go Black Swan, even though the answers to some of my earlier questions lean toward Whiplash. I love Whiplash and I think it's a great film. And like I said, I'll rewatch it all day, but, Black Swan is more aligned with me. I think it's a little darker and it's, a little unsettling, and that's kind of where I live. So I think my winner is Black Swan. So, the tiebreaker here is going to be the online polling, which is Whiplash. So our winner for the week is Whiplash. Congratulations to it. I would say drum roll, but I've heard so many drum rolls this week that I don't need to hear another one. All right. That's it for this week. Let's talk about next week's episode. It's going to be a throwdown between female-led action films, which is going to be interesting. We're going to talk about Atomic Blonde from 2017. That's going to go up against 2021's Gunpowder Milkshake. I don't necessarily remember enjoying either of these films very much, but I think it's going to be fun to go back and, and
Find
look
out.
at them. I think what's going to be interesting is that one of these was made specifically for Netflix, right? Gunpowder Milkshake?
I believe so. The thing about Gunpowder Milkshake is it kind of dropped during the pandemic, so I don't even really know who saw it and who didn't see it. I have no idea. And I just happened to stumble on it because I was sitting home watching movies most of the time. So
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting aspect of the conversation. Is one was in theaters, one was Netflix. So it'll be fun to talk about, the differences that go into creating those two different films, I guess, or platforms. So yeah, join us for that. And don't forget, sign up on social media. We're at Movie Throwdown Pod on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. Follow us there. Vote in our polls and help us determine which one is better, Atomic Blonde or Gunpowder Milkshake. And then come back next week and see who the winner is. We'll see you then. So long.